There's a pattern that I've seen in the comments, in discovery calls, group sessions, one-on-one, and it sounds like, yeah, but that doesn't work for me because I'm ugly, I don't make enough money, I'm not tall enough, I'm too intense. Whatever the unique thing is that you believe makes you specifically unattractive is what we need to talk about today. Because you've probably been asking questions for years, and I'm going to do my best to give you the answer to the actual question that you've been asking. Because telling yourself that I'm attractive or just trying to convince yourself of something different doesn't actually work, and I know you know that. And the reason is because you can't apply logic to an injury. It's like going to the doctor with a broken leg and him giving you a Band-Aid and telling you to walk it off. It's not that theoretically as an able-bodied person you can't walk or run, but if they're not taking into account the actual injury, they're skipping over something that actually needs to be accounted for in your experience, which is the reason that you're asking for help. And this is no different because we can talk about negative self-talk all day, but negative self-talk isn't actually a thinking problem. It's a felt experience that's been encoded in how you move through the world, what you allow yourself to want, what you believe is available to you, and how you interpret people's responses to you. And therefore, I'm not going to convince you to think different thoughts, because what I found actually works is that we need to create a new experience for you that actually accesses where this current story is for you, which is in your body, in the felt experience of how people respond to you when you're showing up as yourself. And I just had a conversation with one of my previous one-on-one clients who said giving someone the experience when they haven't had it themselves is actually what shifted things for him. And I know that that's what actually allows things to shift, is not a new story so much as a new experience. This is why I've built programs designed entirely around creating new experiences for you in a visceral way, because I know that that's where the story is playing out and where we actually need to get to if you want to see a shift. And if that's something I can help you with, set up a discovery call. I'm going to put the link up here because I love having these conversations with people. And if you're new to my work, my name's Courtney Shand. I love helping men with depth learn how to step into it and lead from it. Because when you start accepting that you're a deep person, you can handle and actually require more nuance, you start to see the things that actually make you unique and desirable to the people around you, which naturally boosts your confidence, how you see yourself in relation to these people, and also the circles that you start finding yourself in and how you engage within those. All of that naturally starts to shift when you can step into your authentic depth. Because your beliefs act like a force field energetically around you. They are what allows certain information into your space. Because a lot of times what I see is that when this has been your particular experience, the way that you move through the world is bracing for that specific outcome to be the only outcome. And when it happens, it just becomes more proof that you can point to and say, see, I knew it, this is how it is. And I don't want you to drop this force field because this is actually what keeps you safe in the world. But what I do want to offer, as though you were my client, is that we need to start poking holes in it. Not so that it starts to degrade, but so that you can start letting some new information in a pace that feels safe and comfortable for you. Because if you're convinced that you're right, that this is the way that it is, there aren't other experiences to be had. Because there's something you need to understand about how this force field came into existence. Because as our psyche is developing when we're children, when we experience something that is painful or overwhelming and we don't know what to do with it or how to ground that experience, our mind puts measures in place so that we don't have to experience that particular level of overwhelm again. And as kids, the child logic comes in and starts asking the question, what does this mean about me? Because we learn who we are through the reflection of others. And especially when these experiences happened early on, when either no one was there to correct the story that we told about what this means about us, or when the adults or the people around us were confirming that our assumption was correct. What ends up happening is that we stop challenging it. We stop trying to verify if that is correct or not, and we just trust it. And it becomes the lens through which we see everything else. So while I'm not asking you to be wrong about your experience, what I do want to offer is a new lens through which to see this and see what actually looks different between the lens that you had been using and this newer, updated lens. Because beliefs only dissolve or relax when they're actually accounted for within a larger context. And that's the work that we do in a one-on-one context, is allow some space to have the conversations that haven't been had, to answer the questions that you've been asking for, but haven't necessarily known how to ask for them. Because what we actually need to do to shift this is to expand the child logic of what does this mean about me into what does this mean about them? And more specifically, what am I making that mean about me? Because the reality is, when it comes to painful experiences that we have internalized as now our current reality, it's almost always based on someone else's limitation to be with us in that way. And because when we were younger, we were dependent on the people around us, our mind didn't have access to completing this sentence of what am I making that mean about me? We just assume that if someone can't be with that part of us, that there's something wrong with that part of us. Not that that person doesn't have capacity to be with this part of us. That's the injury that we're actually needing to account for. A lot of people think that they're being realistic about how the world is, but I want to point something out, because on the other side of YouTube, what I have learned is that your algorithm is curated based on what you engage with. So it's not necessarily proof that this is how the world is, or even happenstance that one day you're searching for ways to improve your financial health or your physical fitness or to make yourself more attractive, and ending up hearing the manosphere talk about how women only want men who are high earners, super fit, and ultra handsome. It's not that far of a jump. And I remember when search engine optimization was just starting to come into mainstream, I met with a friend in a networking meeting and he was explaining it to me. And I said, is our phone like listening to us? Because I feel like I just had a conversation with a friend about, toothpaste. And that started popping up on my phone. And he said, no, it's based on proximity of not only what you've engaged with, but the people who you're around, what they're engaging with. All of this is being digitally captured and circulated based on human nature, that who we surround ourselves with is more likely to confirm the experience that we are having. And therefore, it's easier to trust because our mind has a feature where it keeps new information at bay until it does feel trustable. Which is why going back to that need for a bigger frame to account for not only your experience, but also how does that fit in this bigger picture? Because not all content is taking into account your injury. They just know what makes you move. And poking on wounds is a really fast motivator for people. This is literally why a friend of mine and I started our podcast, For the Love of Men podcast, because the conversations that we were having that are not about bashing men, not about bashing women, but truly thinking about the bigger picture and where we both want to be going was something that we wanted to have out in the world. So if you're looking for another resource that helps you expand the frame that you've been working within in the dating space, that's another great one to check out. And I'll put it here so that you have it. Because at the end of the day, you do get to control what comes on your feed based on what you engage with. And if this is resonating and you know that this wound is one that you need to account for, it might be worth looking at what you're using as proof. Is it actually moving you in a direction that you want, or is it continuing to feed the story? Does it give you more agency and a bigger picture to play within, or does it leave you feeling like everything needs to be a fight? This next piece may be really hard to hear, especially as someone who is deep and analytical, but you're not as objective as you think you are. And actually, the fact that you think you are is part of the problem that you're experiencing. There's a concept we teach in Grounded. I won't get too far into it here, but essentially I've talked about on this channel the we space, which is the space between two people that actually makes up the relational container. This is referred to as the intersubjective space. So everyone has their personal experience, their subjective reality, and then there are things that are objective. Things that are measurable and don't necessarily have a story attached to them. Like this case is made of plastic and different types of metals. And then there's the meaning about it, which is more of the intersubjective space, that we space. I know these are headphones, but that's only because it's the relationship that I have to them. And because enough people have that relationship to them, that's how we use it. That's not actually objective, that is intersubjective. And the pattern that I see most often, especially for analytical men, is that you are trying to treat something that is instinctively intersubjective as objective. And when you do that, It forces something that otherwise has a meaning, a use, a purpose, into the sum of its parts. It creates objects, and when you do this in a relational space, you objectify not only yourself, but everyone else. And then you wonder why the experience you're having is one of not feeling like you belong or fit in, when the reality is the way that you're experiencing the world excludes you to start with. And I realize that's an advanced way of explaining it. If you want more insight on that, join the next round of Grounded. We get deeper into this, and we get into the experience of connecting you back with your own experience, which is actually the treatment protocol that your particular injury needs. In the same way that you would expect your doctor to put a cast on a broken leg, not a Band-Aid, the experience that you're needing to start shifting how you move through the world only happens when you're included in that intersubjective we space. And I hear from a lot of men that they would rather work on this with a woman. They don't want to do this in a group of other men. And I hear you, because you've probably had experiences where that was also a really painful place to be. Like I mentioned earlier, beliefs only relax when they are accounted for and kind of oriented within a larger frame. And so I want to put this in perspective for you based on where you currently are, because you actually have a lot more agency than you realize. I see this over and over again when it seems logical to think that you'll change your internal experience when the outside world changes, but we can't actually control what happens outside of us. What we do have control over is where we're putting our attention. And while these injured beliefs are running the show, it's like using self-awareness against yourself. When we think about this in a relational context, we're setting the tone for what we accept, what we're modeling as what we're available for, how we participate in relationships. People are picking up on that based on our relationship to ourselves. So if how you're showing up is bracing for a particular outcome, that's the version of you that people get to engage with. This is why so much of the work that I do requires a visceral element. Because when we dissolve that pattern of bracing, it starts to poke holes in that force field that we were talking about earlier, and people can start not only engaging with you in a more fluid way, but more importantly, you can see the people who are trying to engage with you. And allow yourself to gather new data that doesn't just prove your old experience wrong, but actually expands it so that you can feel like you're operating with clarity. This really becomes a process of recalibrating how you're perceiving. Again, shifting from how people perceive you to how you perceive the world. That shift is what we specialize in doing, and it's what allows people to start experiencing that feeling of belonging and acceptance for who they actually are, instead of just adding more proof as to why they would not be accepted. Because you can think all day that making more money, having a really attractive partner be attracted to you, or finally meeting someone who can love you in a way that allows you to heal this is going to be the solution. And I can promise you that it doesn't work in that order. Not because it can't work in that order, but because as long as you're still bracing, you could be making $1 million a year, have the most societally attractive partner, be in the best shape of your life, and have someone loving you specifically how you're asking, and it will still hit a wall inside of you where you won't allow it in. And I know this because I've had to work through this myself. I helped women with this and now help men with this, because that experience that we're bracing against, the one that we say that we want, if we're not willing to allow that in, we're going to continue to keep the very thing we're asking for at arm's reach and wondering why it feels like we're starving. And I know you've been across from people like this too. There are plenty of cases of women who have a hard time believing that you find her attractive, believing that you mean well, believing that you're not like their last partner. And it's really hard to be across from. Over time, regardless of how genuine you are in your desire to prove them wrong, someone has to be willing to be proved wrong in order for it to actually land. And that's why I wanted to address this today. Because when you're willing to shift things internally, not only does your external reality start to shift, but when it does start to shift, you're actually available to experience it. I remember the first time I told my partner that I found him really attractive, and his response surprised me in a good way. He just said, "Thank you. I guess I've never seen myself that way, but I trust you." And I actually found it really endearing that he was able to be with the fact that just because that hadn't been his experience didn't prove that it couldn't be his experience. And that gap is what allowed me to connect with him in a really human moment. He was able to accept the love that I was offering and not make me build a case around it or like there was a catch, something that I was trying to get. He just allowed it to land. And that actually requires a lot of courage. But what it also does is it sets the stage for more of that experience to come in, which is ultimately doing your part of creating what you say that you want. Because just because you haven't had the experience yet doesn't mean that it's not out there. It just means that it's not living in your felt experience yet. And when you're bracing for that as the inevitable outcome, you're actually blocking the very experiences that you're wanting to have. And again, this is why I've designed Grounded the way that I have, is to give you the felt experience of what it is that's keeping you from having those experiences, which I would love to have you in. And I want to give you a little homework so that you can start setting a bigger frame for yourself this week. It doesn't require you to look in the mirror and tell yourself that you're attractive. That's too big of a jump from where you are. That would be like your doctor telling you to go run when you have a broken leg. What I want for you to do is to let the story be there and just add some curiosity. What decisions have you made from that reality? You may think you're being realistic based on how the world is, but I want you to consider how much energy it takes for you to operate in that context. How often those thoughts come into your mind, the decisions you make as a result of that, what you allow yourself to have and not go after, and just get clear for yourself. Is that a reality you want to continue proving right? Or are you willing to allow yourself to be wrong? And I remember my partner saying, and he's given me permission to share this, that at some point he realized that he was actively trying to be right about something that was making him miserable. And in order to step out of that, he actually needed to let himself be wrong about it. So that's my invitation for you this week as well. Are you open to being proved wrong? And if you are, I want for you to go gather some new data. As you move through the week, notice how often you use those measures of looks, finances, fitness, intensity, whatever the thing is for you, as a hierarchy of people's value. Again, objectifying something that is instinctively meant to be engaged with on a human level. Because if you're doing it to them, you're probably also doing it for them in how you see yourself through their eyes. And I'm curious what shifts for you as you start to allow that to soften. And if you want a self-guided resource for that, I have a masterclass called Bold, Move Like You're Unrejectable, that would help you start shifting how you believe other people perceive you and start stepping into how you perceive the world. If you want to really get in and heal this at the root, that's what we do in Grounded and our one-on-one work. Would love to have you in either of those spaces. And if you're not quite sure which one's the best fit, set up a discovery call. I'm going to put all the links that you need in the description below, and I'm excited to meet you. And if you found this video helpful, I think you'll also like this one.